there's also some more mundane facets to that vision. And here let me suggest to you two things that are a real slap in the face for the postmodern mind. First of all, there is no such thing as private spirituality or private religion. Have you ever heard anybody say, I'm spiritual but I'm not religious? It's the postmodern, or it's the birth of the modern self saying, basically, it seems to me, recognizing there's something there. I need to connect with this bigger picture, but don't talk to me about community, institution, public commitment. Public space in our culture is becoming increasingly fraught. Nobody in their right mind wants to move in there and take on leadership, management, parish councils, whatever. It's a difficult place to be. We love our private space. We want to privatize everything, including spirituality and religion. There ain't no such thing as private spirituality. It is essentially relational. It is essentially a social event. It can't be private. There is a legal dimension. It must be institutionalized. I'm sorry, I couldn't tell you how many times I've had conversations with people, especially younger people, who say that Jesus didn't come to found a religion. You know, it's the institution's problem. Jesus just found a faith. Can't we just have faith in Jesus and love each other? It reminds me of the story of Pachomius back in the early church, 4th century. And he was a Roman officer and went to the desert, and the people in the desert said, why don't you help us to form communities? And he was really the beginning of monastic life happens there. And Pachomius had the notion, as did these people of goodwill in the desert, well, if you love Jesus and have faith in Christ, you're welcome. Now, anybody who's been in religious life, probably anybody who's had a family, will know that's a disastrous way to begin out. You need rules. You need regulations. Somebody has to take responsibility. Pachomius ended up fighting off some of these people with an iron bar. The beginnings of religious life and community. Don't get pious about it. There's a lot of practicality. Human beings do not, of themselves, come together and love each other and work in unity. It's not the nature of the beast. Relationships grow through hard work. We need institutional structures. We need laws. I'm sorry to bring bad news, but that's the fact. Because that's where a lot of the difficulty happens. And at this time in history, we find ourselves wearing our institutions like ill-fitting clothes. We can't do the buttons up. They bite us under the armpits. They just don't fit. The whole purpose of institutional structures is to serve relationships, to help people to flourish. But there's always a price. Human beings don't cope perfectly with institutional structures. All right, that kind of vision must sooner or later find concretization in details. There has to come a point where you agree on some kind of moral norms that you'll operate by, some kind of creedal statement, this is what we believe, and if you're part of this group, well, that's it. And when I say that's it, I'm not talking about this is the end of conversation, but there is a point at which you have to say, well, I'm afraid this is the rule. If you don't like this rule, well, maybe you need to go somewhere else. And the whole purpose of this is to foster relationships, so that that circle, that spiral keeps happening. I'll say a couple of things now about the loss of focus, because I think, as a matter of fact, all of us get tired of conversation. All of us get tired of the business of conversion. We want to rest. Stop the world, I want to get off. Leave me alone. It seems to me that there are at least 3 different places where we can withdraw to, and none of them is healthy. Let's take the 2 least unhealthy ones. You'll hear people say, oh, this relationships, that's what it's all about. And they go off into orbit. They become romantic, pietistic, and paradoxically narcissistic. And just unrealistic. Now, I think that's not far removed from those who think vision, that's what it's all about. Dream. Become impractical, ungrounded, fuzzy. Do we need dreams? Of course we do. But we need more than dreams. Who's going to make the tea? Who's going to bake the lamingtons? Who's going to pay the bills? No. The details. I'm going to invite you to have just a think for 5 minutes or so. I'm going to suggest to you now that the most likely place systems, human groupings, pull out of the conversation is with the details. And my question to you is why? Maybe you don't agree with that, but in my experience, it seems to be the case. And we go across, instead of moral norms that are open to conversation and exploration, we shift into moralism. And instead of creedal formulas, which is healthy dogma, and the great truths of the faith we proclaim, we get into dogmatism. And instead of good, healthy institutional structures that serve relationships, we get into institutionalism, and we get into legalism. And in that sense, we reduce the relational reality to an ideology. It becomes a package. There's one word that keeps coming to my mind, but I'll let you say it later on. That is not far removed from sectarianism, bigotry, fanaticism, and violence. Once you've slipped out of the circle of conversation, you are prone to us and them kind of attitudes. One way of understanding the Second Vatican Council and John the 23rd's action was get back into the circle of conversation. And the word that comes up again and again and again in the Vatican Council and in Pope Paul VI, Ecclesiam Suum, is colloquium, which is normally translated as conversation. For some reason, it became translated as dialogue. And I'm happy with the word dialogue, but it has a sort of an abstractness about it. The conversation doesn't have. Conversation seems more human. Let's take 5 minutes. Reflect with one another about that diagram, what it makes you think about, what you agree with, what you don't agree with, and what might be the causes which prompt you to get out of the conversation. 5 minutes.